Hi, I'm Angie, and this podcast is dedicated to every man who's ever called me a witch. Hey everyone, it's Angie here with the Gamer Crafting Podcast, and here I am with my fabulous Witch's Brew mug, which feels topical and seasonal at the same time, which is a fun intersection to get. So this collection that I am releasing very soon, the Lady Monsters collection, is dedicated and inspired by all the BS that we put up with as women in a patriarchal society. So I wanted to talk a little bit about a few reasons that I personally have been called a bitch, a harpy, a bitter, man-eating lesbian. Here's a few reasons. I used to work at a place where one of my coworkers was a very large-chested woman, but whenever she wasn't in the office, the men that I worked with would refer to her as the large-titted one, and when I told them that was inappropriate, they told me that I was just bitter and jaded and sad that no man would ever want me. When I told a previous workplace that transphobic jokes were not appropriate in or out of the workplace, I was called a bitch. And I got several letters from other coworkers telling me that I was abrasive and difficult to work with because I told them that that wasn't acceptable. I was called a bitch for telling a man I worked with that not all lesbians know each other, Jerry. I don't know who you're talking about or why they did what they did. I've also been called a bitch and a harpy for telling a man that I used to work with that sending me graphic text messages about his sex dreams was not only inappropriate, but wholly disgusting and irresponsible and inexcusable. And he replied, "I thought you were one of the good ones." So obviously none of these experiences are unique, right? Most of us, if not all of us, have dealt with some kind of bullshit on one level or another. And this collection has actually been coming for a while now. A couple of years ago, Sarah and I went to go see Mary Beard do a talk at one of the museums in London before her book Women in Power came out. Women in Power is a book that talks a lot about the portrayal of women as monsters throughout history and how frequently women who are given power or who seek power in folk stories and mythology are then monstrous and something that's not desirable. They become ugly or they become a monster that kills or wounds or what have you. Something she talked a lot about was the imagery of Hillary Clinton during the 2016 presidential election. Regardless of what you think about Hillary Clinton, I think you can all agree that the portrayal was hella sexist, y'all. So I have read this book and we went to this talk and I've been thinking for a long time about how women who are powerful in history are typically portrayed as being monstrous. And I feel like it's time to just, wrap ourselves in a big hug of monstrousness and just really lean into it and just accept it and absorb it. So I dyed these 6 new colorways for the Lady Monsters collection. I will say I'm pretty new to dyeing collections. I know that there are some indie dyers who do them every other month or every month. I am unfortunately very limited by space, so I can't do them as often as I would like, but this one's been coming for a while and I really hope that you enjoy it. Okay, hello everyone. Here is the very first yarn from the new Lady Monsters collection. So this is Mermaid, not to be confused with Siren. Mermaids were historically cited by some of the colonizers of the 15th century, and they said, "Oh yeah, we saw mermaids," but they were probably manatees. They were probably manatees, which is why one of the reasons that I have a yarn called Mermaids, or no, it's called Merfolk. Merfolk would be fat, because they would be. You'd have to be fat in order to survive the Arctic temperatures of the ocean. So, obviously, the most common knowledge of mermaids comes from The Little Mermaid, the Disney version, but it was a story written by Hans Christian Andersen in 1836. It was super grisly, and some have theorized that it was actually kind of a sad, gay love letter to a man that he knew, called Edvard Cullen. is he also wrote a letter to that man that said, "I languish for you as a pretty Calabrian wench." Calabria is a region in Italy. Make of that what you will. So here you can see it on the different bases. I've lined them up the same for every yarn. So we have the chunky merino here, and then the DK sock. Here we have the sparkle sock. You can see the sparkle there. Yak sock, chunky singles, which is a brand new base, and the regular 4-ply sock. So there you go. That is Mermaid. Again, not to be confused with Siren. I'll get to that in a minute. Here we have Siren. Sirens are not mermaids. Sirens are actually bird-like women. There's been a lot of change to how they have looked over the course of history. It wasn't until sort of Christianic imagery took hold that we started seeing sirens conflated with mermaids. But historically, sirens are sort of human bird hybrids instead of human fish hybrids like mermaids are. There used to be male sirens, but the imagery for that all sort of disappeared after the 5th century BC. The Romans tended to portray sirens with flowers and meadows and very sort of land-based, whereas the Greeks tended to portray them as sea creatures. But regardless, either way, they were portrayed as sitting atop, sort of rocky cliffs and luring pirates to their graves, which is the thing that makes them the same as mermaids, I guess, luring ships to their demise. And in the 16th century, Leonardo da Vinci described sirens as luring men on the boats to sleep and then leaping aboard to kill them. So again, here we have the same lineup of bases. Chunky merino, DK sock, sparkle sock, yak sock, chunky singles, and finally 4-ply sock. So there you have it. That is Siren. Here we have Harpy. I based the colors on this from the Harpies in World of Warcraft, which tend to be more shades of blues and greens and sometimes a little bit of purple. So Harpies have been described in various texts as human vultures, but they've also been described in other texts as being fair-haired maidens, so make of that what you will. Their name means snatchers, and historically in texts, they would steal food from people while they were out eating, which is honestly a mood. If I was going to be a mythical monster, I would definitely steal people's food. I'd be like, I'm gonna have that. Thank you very much. The harpy eagle, if you're familiar with that enormous bird, harpy eagles were named for harpies. Pop culture tends to portray harpies as being shrill, with screechy voices, and in a matriarchal society. Again, make of that what you will. Make of that what you will. That's especially true in both World of Warcraft and Guild Wars 2. Harpies definitely not portrayed in a favorable way. So here we have, again, the same lineup. We have chunky merino, DK sock, sparkle sock, yak sock. This is Dryad. I feel as though Dryads are unfairly maligned. I have heard a lot of people refer to them as lady monsters, but they're more of a chaotic good, and in fact that is their alignment in Dungeons & Dragons. But anyway, this is Dryad. Historically, they are tree nymphs that had a special relationship with oak trees specifically, but then there were other kinds that had special kind of relationships with other kinds of trees. They are typically pretty, quiet and peaceful. I definitely feel like they are unfairly maligned, as I said. Here we go again with the different ones. So Chunky Merino, DK Sock, Sparkle Sock, Yak Sock, Chunky Singles, and 4-ply Sock, which shows off that neon really nice. Basically, I think that sometimes people maybe unfairly malign Dryads as being, monstrous because in many cases they are sort of the protectors of green areas, or the protectors of nature. And so while they are chaotic good, they will still mess you up if you're trying to chop down ancient magical trees and stuff. So if you want to stay on their good side, maybe just don't do that. Okay, so the original voiceover for this didn't take due to some difficulties with the new microphone that I bought for my phone. So this is Gorgon, which, as many of you will know, also kind of known as Medusa. So women with snakes for hair that turn men into stone if they look at them. In many times throughout history, this was thought of as, women that were too powerful or too vain or narcissistic would turn into gorgons and then turn everybody who looked upon them into stone, thus preventing them from having any kind of praise or compliments, which is just kind of a gross, it's kind of a gross narrative. So here are the different bases for Gorgon. So here we have the Chunky Merino, and then the DK sock. I really like this. The green is for the sort of snakes and the gray is for the stone. Like a nice neon green there. So the Chunky Merino and the DK sock, and then Sparkle sock, and then Yak sock, the new Chunky Singles, and the regular 4-ply. So that's Gorgon, also known as Medusa, which is definitely one of my favorites in this collection, and I really hope that you all like it as well. I particularly like it on the Chunky Singles if I'm picking favorites, which of course I never would, except it's definitely my favorite base for this yarn, and in general I do like it a lot. This is definitely my favorite of the collection, and in fact I didn't know that this mythological creature even existed until somebody messaged me on Instagram. So I don't remember who you were, but if it was you, thank you so much. So this is Pusa, which are shapeshifter ladies that would seduce men and then feast on them and drink their blood and eat their flesh and be pretty grisly about the whole affair, really. But I mean, like, can you blame them? They're these giant shapeshifters that had a varying number of legs made of bronze or donkey legs based on whose account you were reading. But some accounts have them with quite fiery hair, which is obviously where I've drawn the inspiration from. And the gray of sort of donkeys, I guess. Donkeys can be more of a brownie color, but we're not gonna get too literal with the colors of donkeys here. So this is probably my favorite from the collection because I think that these neons just like sing with this gray on pretty much all of the bases, especially the Yak sock. Look at that. Ugh, so good. Sometimes you dye something and you really regret saying that it was going to be an exclusive because you just want to keep dyeing it forever and ever, amen. And I don't know, if it sells out, I might have to consider making it a regular colorway. If any of these are what you'd like to see become a regular colorway, I don't know, drop it into the comments. Maybe we can see what we can do. I don't know, no promises. So this is in Pusa, and that is the end of the collection. So there are 6 brand new shades coming very soon. Yeah. So I hope that you have enjoyed seeing the new colorways. If you watched last week's podcast, you'll have seen Harpy being dyed, or at least partially, as well as one of the other ones, Gorgon, I do believe. So I hope that you enjoyed seeing the collection, hearing a little bit about the etymology and the inspiration behind each shade. Some people might kind of, nobody's probably going to come at me, at least I hope not, don't at me, about the inclusion of Dryad, given that Dryads are not necessarily very often portrayed as monstrous or a villain. they're usually portrayed as a bit more, meek and mild-mannered, and they're just there to protect the forest, and as long as you don't cut down all their trees, they're fine. But honestly, I see Dryads as a bit more of, like I said in one of the clips there, they are described in the Dungeons & Dragons universe as being a chaotic good. And I feel like being chaotic good is one of the most exciting and exhilarating experiences, being chaotic good. And a lot of times people don't know what to do with chaotic good, especially if you're in a workplace environment. If you're in a workplace environment, chaotic good could be, I don't know, I'm struggling to think of things. But being chaotic good is sometimes something that throws people really off balance, especially in this society that we're becoming, which really rewards performative cruelty, which is something that I find not just reprehensible, but really upsetting, that this is the world that a lot of kids of the next generation are growing up in, is saying, oh, well, it's cool to do, these blast videos, ripping down somebody else's creative efforts, and saying, oh, well, this book was awful and it was terrible and I hated it and the author's trash, or I hated this film and everyone involved should be ashamed of themselves. And honestly, we can have media critique. I'm all for media critique. I'm here for it. But, there comes a line between this story or this plot line is problematic or the casting is problematic and everyone involved should be ashamed of themselves and put themselves on a Viking funeral pyre and send themselves flaming over the waterfalls in a blaze of unglory. So I think that chaotic good is something that is very powerful because it's unexpected a lot of the times. And it's also some of the people that I know that are the most introverted and that really struggle with, large groups, or they struggle with meeting new people, are some of the most chaotic good people I have ever met in my life, in such astoundingly generous ways, both financially and with their time, that it blows me away. And they get unfairly maligned by society too, by people who say, oh, well, they're only doing it because they want to be liked, or they're only doing it because they want attention. Meanwhile, Bill Gates or Jeff Bezos does a tiny little bit of charity, and everyone just falls all over themselves saying how great they are. So I think I included the Dryads because chaotic good is something that a lot of people don't know what to do with, and they still see it as this almost threatening force, but it's not. Well, I guess it could be threatening if you're if you're threatened by a chaotic good. So that's why I included Dryads, and I guess that's all you really need to know about that. Anyway, so I hope that you enjoyed this podcast. I know that it's a little bit shorter than last week's. I'm still working on getting some sort of consistency going. We're not quite there yet. Please do tune in for the Saturday night live stream. All this month in October, we are doing sort of light spooky, so no jump scares, nothing that's gory or scary, just sort of gentle spookiness. Just to kind of have the overall seasonal vibe of autumn and Halloween and spookiness without, traumatizing anyone. I don't like jump scares either. So do join us on Saturday nights for live streams, and I will be back next week with another podcast, and I hope you enjoyed this one, and I hope you all have a fantastic week. Do like and subscribe, and please do watch our videos so we don't feel like we're doing this for no reason. The Lady Monsters collection will be available very soon, and if you are wanting to get your hands on some of these very limited edition yarns, you can sign up to the newsletter at gamercrafting.com/newsletter, and newsletter subscribers get at least 8 to 10 hours of a head start before the collection goes live on social media. Thanks, everyone. Keep it yarny.